Memoirs of Dr. Mehdi ضرغامی, February 28, 1985, Arlington, Mass. Interview شهلا حائری. Dr. ضرغامی, I'd like to ask you the same questions I asked last time before we were cut off. Were there students who would want to write a newspaper praising the Trump's policy?
I'm sure that there were students who were pro-regime or did not feel any danger from the direction and the speed of development of Iran and all the political connotations of it. However, if a person does not feel a danger, he is apt to not do anything. In other words, the political system in Iran was not so that a person had to really sell anything or defend anything. The defense of the ideas of Shah was made by Shah's regime, and the open environment wasn't there, so there was no threat. As a result, you didn't have too many students who would stand up and be counted on the side of the Shah. If the system were more open, I would imagine that there would have been people who would want to stand up and be counted in that regard. But the need never arose. If anybody screamed, there was a danger of getting caught by Savak. I mean, this was more danger than real opposition. However, there were oppositions amongst the different factions of the dissidents. I mean, there were people who had more religious ideas as opposed to Marxist ideas. They were always fighting with each other. But the fighting was conducted in such a way that was totally obscure to the government. But definitely there were a number of occasions in which the oppositions fought harshly. In fact, I remember that Sharif was a student who of Ariamehr University, and he was a member of Mujahideen. He was very much religious, and he opposed the creeping communist ideas in Mujahideen organization, and he was essentially murdered by Mujahideen. Mm-hmm. Yeah, another student was pushed from the 4th floor of the dormitory of Ariamehr University. He smashed his head on the asphalt and was killed. And
who pushed him?
It was never known. Although there were students around, they even never cooperated to the extent of finding who did it. But it was definitely this incident, like killing of Sharif, was politically motivated.
When you say Mujahideen murdered him, how did they do them? How did they murder
Well, they
Sharif?
took him, Sharif was taken, well, there was a guy, another student called Shahram. He wasn't, I don't believe he was the student of, Shahram was his last name. Shahram was not a student of Ariamehr University, and he was pushing for Marxist ideology, and Sharif was a student of Ariamehr University, and he opposed the creeping Marxism, because and also the decision that was being made at that time by Mujahideen to abandon the Islamic foundation part and go more and more lean toward Marxism, because they somehow felt the danger of leaning too much toward Islam, the danger that finally happened to them. I mean, the thing would fall ultimately in the hand of mullahs and or extremists, Islamic extremists, and therefore they thought that sometimes in 1970s, early 1970s, was right time to divorce from the Islamic principles and go more and lean more and more towards Marxism. This idea faced an opposition among some of the factions in Mujahideen organization, and one of the outspoken members was Sharif, who was murdered by Shahram and others. This became quite clear after revolution, when Shahram was imprisoned by the regime immediately after revolution.
So no charges were brought against anybody?
Well, they couldn't. Well, I don't know. I don't. No, charges were not brought against Shahram. At least it wasn't known to the regime that who had done it. They knew that it was an action of Sazman Mujahideen, but they didn't know who had done it. If they would have found Sazman Mujahideen members, I mean, top members, I think they would have imprisoned or killed them anyway. So whether it was for the murder of Sharif or not, that would be immaterial.
Which of the Ariamehr University students who were later imprisoned or executed did you know personally?
I think that there was one student that I knew personally, in the sense that I was his faculty advisor, and there were a number of them who were in my classes, and I knew only their faces. The one that I knew personally was, I think his name was Olumi. I know that he was imprisoned. There was another student who was not a member of Sazman Mujahideen. He was just an outspoken critic of the regime. His name was Etrat, and he was imprisoned. Etrat. He was imprisoned for several years. There were a large number of other students who were in prison for shorter time and periods. There were amongst them is Ibrahim Hendinejad, who was in prison for a few months, and I knew him relatively well. He was niece or nephew of Khomeini, and there were others who were members of the Mujahideen organization, or they were compatriots of, not necessarily an active member, but they had supporting feelings towards them. I would say altogether I probably knew about 10 of such persons who were either imprisoned or killed. I'm just thinking about the name of a person who was Kermani, and he went to he carried a bomb to Kurosh, a department store, and somehow the bomb exploded in his hand in the bathroom. I think he may have been hesitant of whether to plant that bomb or not. And finally, he was severely damaged and imprisoned afterwards. You know.
Could you describe some of these individuals? I mean, like you said, some last time.
By and large, they were not outspoken. The ones I'm specifically referring to the terrorist members of the Mujahideen or Fadaiyan. First of all, Ariamehr University didn't have, I don't think that they had a lot of members of the Fadaiyan organization. Whoever I knew there were belonging to the Mujahideen organization. By and large, they were introvert. They did not mingle well with other students even. They rarely attended class, at least toward the end of the time of their capture. I mean, Ulumi first year maybe he was a okay student, but later on he became. You felt a depression in their or a depression feeling in their attitudes. They were very much eager to pass the courses, so they came toward the end of the course and they wanted to get a grade and take the exams and this sort of thing. And I had the policy that I wanted to see the students all through the year, and usually I ended up talking to these people. Where were you? Why didn't you take the interim exams? Where are your homeworks? And this sort of things. And he would answer in a confused, lost way that you would know that here you go again. And if somebody from Berkeley made this was during late 1960s, early 1970s, made a distinction between two groups of, between various students by dividing them according to whether they had psychological or social alienation. By psychological alienation, we mean somebody who is not who has feelings of loneliness, of inability, powerlessness, etc., etc. By social alienation, it means somebody who doesn't agree with the trends, pace, or direction that the society is developing. A number of students were socially alienated, and they used to sit down and talk and discuss, and they wanted to actively participate in everything, and they wanted to improve the society. You would see them as they spoke. They were against the government or against the direction that the country was going, but at their heart there was an idea for development. There were other students who were psychologically alienated. They were either withdrawn from the society, or they were terrorists when they became extremely socially alienated as well. It was probably a result of their upbringing or because of the shattering of their value system in a rapidly developing society of Iran. What was happening in Iran was this, that the entire value system of the students, especially those that came from the more remote places, were being changed. And kid who had come from a small town was and had sort of religious upbringing. And came necessarily from a poor family. He saw the lavish of the Tehran, and he saw all the corruptions, and he saw even girls and boys going out on dates. He couldn't digest that, and he definitely felt there was something wrong with him. He couldn't possibly mix with this society. Where are the principles? And he at the same time was being attracted to these, and he had to resist. And there was this tremendous fight within his inner system. Now add to that some social alienation, a lot of social alienation, and you would have your terrorists. And they were very withdrawn. They did not talk even to their fellow students, etc., etc. At the same time, I can also see that they had much higher things in mind. So they knew that they were going to lose their lives on that. I mean, that's a big decision, and I can see why you would get depressed. Or, I mean, now which one came first? Was there social and psychological alienation that led into terrorists, or was it really getting into terrorism and then by nature you become psychologically and socially alienated? I don't know, but what I saw was a manifestation that was clear to me, a social and psychological alienation simultaneously. But by and large, the students who had social alienation, they developed into ordinary people in Iran. I mean, they would criticize, etc., and then they graduate and find a job in plan organization, this place, this company, that company, and they would lead a normal life. The people who had extreme psychological alienation, you would know something is going to go wrong.
If we may take a concrete example, let's take ulumi. I mean, all these characteristics you mentioned, does it fit ulumi? Or
yeah, I think ulumi would fit that. Ulumi would fit the psychological alienation. In the first year, he was normal. In the second year, he was withdrawn. In the first year that he was normal, he really came from a poor family. He had religious background and upbringing, and he had problems in the first year, but he coped with those problems in some way. In the second year, he was really withdrawn. By the beginning of the third year, I heard that he was involved in one of those incidents that led either to his arrest or anyway, he was involved in some sort of a terrorist activity, and then he was captured, and later on I heard that he wasn't captured. But anyway, we knew that he had lost ulumi. It was just a matter of time when he would be captured, murdered, or killed.
Was there an organization within Áriامهر University that would recruit these students? I mean, how did
I have to answer you by guessing. I would say that the students who belong to Mujahideen organization would have a technique of expanding their organization, and essentially would be looking for the people who have social and psychological alienation who would join them. And I think that the way that it was done very gradually by asking them first to gather in such a place and screen against government. I mean, one of the demonstrations. Now, demonstrations were very confined demonstrations, but it was announced in the day before in specific places. And secondly, they would maybe give them a bunch of literature to distribute, or placed in certain places that it would be picked up by the other students. And once they developed a trust in him and involved him with various activities, I think gradually they would absorb him into the organization. But I can see that in order for somebody to really become absorbed into the organization at that time, it would have taken many months or years of hard work until they would qualify. The initiation would not be that easy. I mean, they couldn't recruit on a short-term basis.
Approximately how many Áriamher University students were at one time or another imprisoned or executed?
Well, you have to distinguish between the two. I have to say that there were two kinds of imprisonments in Iran. One form of imprisonment was associated with non-terrorist groups. It was maybe a technique of the government in order to show to the average students that you shouldn't really go after the terrorists. Essentially, if there was a meeting and if one of these kids were available, or if they knew that this guy has some books or has some pamphlets or literature and this sort of thing, they may go to his house and arrest him. Usually such arrests were for short period of time. Many students got arrested in this way or by mass arrest in demonstrations inside the campus. I know that after a demonstration in 1950, I was selected by the faculty to go and see if any of the kids were lost their lives, and this was after a severe beating that was given to the students of Áriamher University that year, about a month after Siyakal event. I went with the permission of Rais Police. At that time I was working with Dr. Reza Amin, who was Chancellor of the university. I was in charge of a newly formed Office of Planning and Development. Anyway, I was elected by the faculty, and permission was obtained by the Chancellor, and I visited the prison where about several hundred students were kept temporarily for a few days. And afterwards, they released the students. They went home. Anyway, in that event, we had about 1/4 of the student body inside prison. When I became Chancellor, I requested the name of all the kids who have in some manner not attended and the list came out, and it was again a couple of hundred.
Not attended classes?
Not attended classes. Well, some of them may have left for Europe, but by and large they would have been in prison or something like that. So there were a couple of hundred, but gradually they came back during from 1975 to 1977. We had a return from prison. Apparently what happened must have been something like this, that sometimes in 1975, this is the same year that Shah declared Rastakhi's party, they gathered a lot of people and put in prison. And later on, from 1975, when they also passed a law of the law was this, that if somebody is accused of some offense, in the judgment of the Attorney General, his sentence can be increased by threefold, according so that social problem or whatever problem that they have would be dealt with. Now, as a result, if previously you would get 3 years imprisonment for insulting Shah, now it was changed to 10 years. It was horrible. But something happened as a result of that. The phenomena that happened was this, that they had a large number of people in prison that they were keeping almost indefinitely because of this triple factor. I mean, and if a guy was 2 years in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, which was previously considered a short imprisonment, it was changed to 6 years, 9 years, 12 years. Now this was enormous. Then sooner or later they stopped, the government almost, the Slovaks stopped gathering people in that manner. No more people were captured as before. Now that may be associated with Carter and human rights and this sort of thing, I know. But also they had picked up a stone, I mean, too large for them to be able to throw it. So they collected all those people. I think they must have run out of space, I mean physical space, and just management of the prisons. Anyway, that must have been a problem. But anyway, Shah, after in 1976-77, claimed that there are only 3,000 political prisoners. If his number was correct, then at that time, 1975, we must have about 200, 250 of them probably belong to Ariamehr University, which is somewhere around 8 to 10% of the, well, that shows how important maybe Ariamehr University was. But toward the end of my time as Chancellor, I think the number had dropped down significantly. Amongst the second category are those that were actively pursuing terrorism. I mean, those who really wanted to kill and die. And I would say there weren't that many of them, probably 10, 12, 15, that I would know that they lost their lives, something of that nature. Or were imprisoned, but such imprisonments were equivalent to losing life. Or even if it wasn't equivalent, I'm categorizing it as such. It wasn't for having Das Kapital, I mean, on your shelf.
If you think you have answered some of these questions, please feel free to.
I really can't tell you because I don't know. I mean, I have a feeling that I've answered all of these questions, but because of the tape problem, I can't distinguish whether it was I've answered it or not. So you may have redundancy.
That's all right.
I apologize for redundancy, but that's your fault also.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, here, this is one of those questions which is on the border, but I'm going to ask you again, and you see what we can do with it. How much did you know about the alleged crimes or the trials?
Nothing. We knew that these people were, I mean, the people that. Well, let me go back and I discussed that there were two groups of people who were imprisoned. One of them I would consider that they, as people who had attended several meetings or they had read a book or this sort of thing. It was an imprisonment as a part of the suppressiveness of the regime extended to these individuals. I knew by and large that these people, by any definition, they are innocent, and everybody considered them innocent, and we're happy that these people would get out, and we would do everything possible to obtain release of these individuals. The second group are those that were actively involved in terrorism. I think that we didn't know what these students were doing. We didn't know what was their accusation or what they were accused of, and we didn't know how the court proceedings went. But we would know that these people if these people had received a sentence, we would know of the sentence if it was imprisonment. If it wasn't imprisonment, I don't know. Probably we would never hear about it.
You mean if it was just execution?
If it was execution, I don't think that there were that many kids who were executed. I mean, with the exception of Gul Surkhi and others, execution following an official sentence was something relatively remote. Several people who were executed were those that they proved some sort of either belonged to the Gul Surkhi group or they proved that these people participated in killing somebody. The rest of them were killed in action. Or they had other stories also that, but sometimes they even never explained. I heard of one incident, and this incident was something like this, that one of these kids was on the campus, and I heard a strange story that suddenly a Slovak agent that was trailing this guy, who was also on the campus, how I don't know, because we used to check everybody's ID card when they entered the university, suddenly started chasing him and then shot and killed him in a street next to the university. This action took place in such a speed and the body was removed. I heard this from one of the usual guards of the university who stands in front of the door. It was never in the paper. I was never informed of it. Nothing happened. So I don't know. I don't have a good idea about what would happen to such a person. But those who did select to join the terrorist organizations, I think they knew what would happen to them. I mean, this was something, and we were not at all involved with what happens to them or how they are dealt with.
What were the sentiments of the faculty and administration of Áriamehر University when arrests or executions of their students became known?
Again, I have to distinguish between the two. The arrest has two parts. One part has to do with the first group of which I don't consider really an accusation of any form. I mean, the guy had a book or participated in a meeting or something of this nature, which wouldn't be considered a crime in the West. Toward the first, there was tremendous feeling of compassionacy. The faculty wanted the students released, etc., etc. The second group, which are the terrorists essentially, the faculty had a feeling that these people, well, they knew what they were doing. And by and large, there wasn't that much feeling of compassionate towards them. They said that these people have selected to pick up arms, they are killing, and they know that they are going to get killed. Now, of course, some of the ways that, or the stories that existed about torture, etc., didn't create also a feeling of compassionate toward the regime. I mean, but you have to make a distinction between the arrest that is made on a kid because he happened to have a book that his teacher also has got it on his shelf. I mean, every guy who goes back there are 2-3 books on his shelf that if the Savak would have come, would have considered them to be Ketabai Muzerre, and the guy would be subject to arrest. So I would say that the faculty had this dual feeling, but by and large the faculty was really not didn't have a feeling of distance between them and the students. And because 90%, 95% of the arrests were of the first kind, therefore they had a anti-government sentiment in this regard, and their feeling was leaning more toward the student who got arrested.
That brings me to, in fact, the next question, which is very much related. Was the topic ever discussed in a formal or informal meeting by the faculty?
Yes, in one case. In one case it was discussed, but usually, by and large, you couldn't have discussed them. I mean, the subject, if it came up, it came up informally rather than formally. The one occasion was that in 1950, after the police came inside the university and gave a beating to all the students and the faculty. I mean, the faculty at Ariamehr University was very young. I mean, it was just a few years older than the students. So police couldn't distinguish them. So when they came and started beating everybody, some of the professors also got a batum or two. At that time, there was a meeting of all the faculty members, sort of general, and the topic came up. As a result of that, all the faculty resigned, submitted resignation. And I was out of town. When I came the next day, I was selected as I was elected by faculty to go and try to find out because who was killed, because the students were saying that a large number of bodies were taken out of the university, and that's obvious because whenever there is an attack by police, a lot of people faint. I mean, they just faint. It's not a pleasant sight. You see a guy, for example, with helmet and the thing coming towards you, and especially women faint. Some of the boys even are very young, 17, 18, 19. They faint, or some of them even they have concussion and they faint. So they saw a large number of bodies. Anyway, I was the students were all in black, and I went after the students to hospitals and houses, etc., etc. In order to locate everybody. Anyway, I located everybody. Fortunately, nobody was killed. But this was, in this time, I got the chance to go inside the prison, and which I talked about later, before.
Okay. What was the origin of the establishment of university police or guard Dانشگاهی? Who controlled the guard What was the organizational relationship with the Chancellor and Ministry of Higher Education?
The guards, university guards, were established in 1950, immediately after this famous beating at the Ariamehr University.
I'm sorry, you mean 1350?
Sorry, 1350. After this beating, because this was the year that a number of things happened. Number one, Siyakal was formed. Number two, both at Tehran University and Ariamehr University more. There were severe beatings of the students after they demonstrated against Shah and for Siyakal group. It was the year, the 25th anniversary of Shahanshahi was to be conducted. Anyway, the anniversary was in fall, but they had to tighten the system, essentially, for the fall occasion. And the terrorists started opposing the anniversary show, and in fact it was the terrorists really became active in that year. In that year, in the summer of that year, in Ramsar, there was an annual conference in Ramsar, which all the high administration of the universities participated with government and Shah himself. Shah proposed establishment of guard. I was under the impression that somebody in Ministry of Higher Education made the proposition, and they wanted to prevent this clash between police and students. So they say, why not just put the police inside? And anyway, Shah liked the idea, and anyway, it was inserted into the conference what do you call it? Agenda. It wasn't discussed, but anyway, the conclusion was put in after Shah got angry because it wasn't in the it wasn't amongst one of the conclusions. Anyway, in that year, it was established. It said that guard is going to operate under the direction of the chancellor, but they had their own authorities spelled out. That means that it wasn't although it was really I had the authority supposedly to ask them to leave the university at certain point, or go over there, or do this or do that. It wasn't at all clear. In fact, it wasn't clear that I was their commander. Of course, they had a commander. I mean, their military commander was somebody who was stationed at University of Tehran. And when a university needed more force, instead of bringing people from police force or which were not accustomed to dealing with students, they wanted to have a group of police or guards that were accustomed to the student activity and this sort of things, and they would be well equipped. They were not armed. There were no firearms at all in their hands or in their possession. They had usually they had nothing to do with the arrest of the students, they were primarily there to prevent mass demonstrations. Students' mass demonstrations. When I was chancellor, I remember once I found I was opposed to their existence. I don't believe that the university site is holy and no police should enter it. That wasn't the reason of my opposition. I was opposed to it because I was. This was by itself sort of. It would be able to nucleate unrest very easily. All you had to do is to shout something. They would become. I mean, they would go on alert, and you throw a stone or something to a guy in one of these police, and he would start chasing you. Once a police starts chasing a kid, the whole university is on the run. Now, this was, you could disrupt classes in no time if you wanted, and the police could never catch up with a guy in sneakers and this sort of things. I mean, the kid who was going to do that, he was wearing sneakers, I mean, and he was capable of running, loose clothes, and the police had all these heavy stuff with him, I mean, boots and this sort of thing. So the student would lose himself in the masses of the other students, and what would remain in the university was a large number of kids who have escaped from the guard, and the guard is essentially symbolizing the regime. And that wouldn't create any pleasant feelings amongst students. And you could disrupt classes, and I was against that and opposed to that. Anyway, when I called the commander and I asked him that please leave and don't enter unless I ask you, he said I can leave, but I can't stay out. He said, well, leave then. And I asked him to leave, and a few days later he came with a letter. He says that I can't leave. I mean, you have to sign this letter that anything that goes wrong is your fault. And I signed that letter, and that letter must be somewhere. That I accept all responsibilities, and you just get out whenever I tell you. Later on, after revolution, one of the kids who was in charge of committee at Ariamehr University, he called me. And he said that, do you know such a student called Farhang Darvishoui? And I said, yeah. He said he was a member of SAVAK. I said, okay, so what's new? He said that he was under direction at the time that you had asked the police, the guard, to leave the campus. He was under the direction to create disruption and tear down laboratories and this sort of thing. So that, well, they must have had some interest in the sense that they wanted to show to other universities that if you do this, then you are going to suffer the consequences. Anyway, that's what happened. That means SAVAK was acting essentially in a direction which was opposite to the direction of a chancellor. This is very funny. I don't know who was working for who.
Was there actually an unrest during the time that you asked the
yeah,
when
I asked the secret guard to leave, I know that the opposition, the extremists, the terrorist groups, etc., they easily felt the danger. That is, I mean, if the guard was out, there would have been a compassionate feeling, or there would be a sort of a pro-government feeling or pro-university feeling, which would propagate amongst the students. And this was not good for them. So what they did, they started a series of actions that sort of escalated in order to demonstrate their opposition and entice me to bring back the guard. It's very funny, but I get the feeling, or I always had the feeling, that the Savak and the terrorists were made of the same material. They were the same fabric, only cut in half. Half of them were put in charge of controlling, and the other half in charge of opposing to that extent. And anyway, this series of actions included actually stoning my office, included of breaking, enormous amount of breaking windows and glasses in order to disrupt the university. The university did not disrupt. The students sat in the class, and they were going to disrupt the examinations, and the students sat in the exam until the students actually kicked these activists out of the class. They said, just leave. And they wanted to, they said, you see, I mean, the students wanted to finish and graduate. Every time that there was disruption, the university had passed a regulation that the 16 weeks of education had to be delivered. That means disruption of classes doesn't mean that that part of the course would not be covered. The term would be extended until you cover all that. And in order to not lose the rhythm, we said that if the extension was more than certain amount, we are going to lose that term altogether. So the students wanted to stay, and to stay in the class and take the exams, and now with the absence of guard, it was the activist group that was trying to force them to leave classes, and they didn't want that. So the activists sort of escalated. They broke all the windows, they shattered laboratories, they destroyed libraries, but finally they gave up.
I'm sorry, were the activists Mujahideen?
Well, they were pro-Mujahideen. They were usually what happens is this, that the real Mujahideen were in the back. They would get some of these groups who have been recruited, and then they form them into activist groups that would go and do things for them. They were I would say, the workers of the hierarchy of Mujahideen. They were not the real sort of thinker Mujahideen.
If we may go back to one comment you made just a few minutes ago about Savak working against the chancellor and who's working for whom. What was the extent of the Savak's activities within the university, and how much were you aware of, or the chancellor was aware of what?
There was one thing that I was aware, and that was the personnel office had to submit every name of every applicant and special application to Savak for clearance unless that person was being employed on a short-term basis. So we had a number of people who were employed at Áriamher University who otherwise would not be as temporary help, not as permanent. Usually they would take the name of a person, and then they would state that this guy had some activities abroad, and then I would convey, that message would be conveyed by our personnel office to me. I would talk to the chairman of the department, and chairman of the department say that we really need that person. So I ask personnel to prepare a letter to them that we really need that person, and upon receipt of a letter that says that I am responsible, the chancellor says I am responsible, they would permit the university to hire that. There were only few occasions that they really violently disagreed. Anyway, that was one activity. The second activity of SAVAK was totally unknown to us, what they were doing with students, either the students who were working for them or the students who were working against them. I mean, that part was totally unknown to us. And we had no way of even knowing what they wanted to do. In fact, many of the otherwise, I would say, natural trends, like the formation of that union, etc., it was associated with SAVAK. They said, hey, this is the mechanism that they are setting up in order to do this, to do that. There was much more activities were associated with SAVAK than really involved SAVAK. But we were ignorant of the activities of SAVAK inside. Then the third was official contacts of SAVAK with the university, in which they would come and they would have a representative of SAVAK would come and would say something, and usually the stuff that they were saying was, I met a guy who came once and said that they had information that one of the such and such person, who was not really a member of the faculty, was engaged in corrupt activities. And I said, what is the activity? He said, Dr. such and such, I don't want to mention his name, he made a firm and he obtained representation from another company, and he's buying the material from his own firm. So he would get, in a way, he would get kickback. Anyway, we told him that that person was not associated with Ariamehr University and was now in another organization. Anyway, that never prevented the progress of that corrupt individual, because he just went on and on, and I know. Anyway, but that was, for example, the type of official visits that they would have. I mean, it was a member would come and say something like this. Very similar. I mean, it looks like that an aspect of the work is of the universities of SAVAK was like FDI in this country, and was very overt, as opposed to covert activities. And the overt activities is what I call as official.
But during the time that you were either as a professor at Áriamehر University or as the chancellor, were you aware of SAVAK activities, and did you think that they were working against you? In the office.
Yeah, I think that there was. First of all, I was aware of the SAVAK activities because of so many arrests of the innocent students, and I was feeling that SAVAK is, as a faculty member, I was feeling that SAVAK is working. I mean, whatever SAVAK stands for is essentially against my principles. But at the same time, I accepted the existence of SAVAK. That's SAVAK. When I was chancellor, I didn't think that SAVAK was working for me or against me. I mean, definitely I would say that they were so remote of the intricate problems of a university that they weren't working for me. They had their own goals and this sort of thing. They never worked. Also, I wouldn't really imagine that they would be working against me, because I thought that, I mean, this is stuff I told you, it really came out after after the revolution and after I was released from jail.
So in other words, they were working against the office of the chancellor, but that
at least in this incident, I don't know, they had their own purposes and their own goals, and their own activities were geared to those goals and principles, etc. And definitely their concern was not proper functioning of university. That was my problem, whether education and research was done properly or not. They wanted quiet, I suppose.
Please go ahead.
I think I am finished with the answer.
Okay. I think this question again was asked in another context, but I'd still like to discuss it with you. How and why were you removed from Ariamehri University?
As I told you, the reason for my removal from Ariamehri University was because the government of Mr. Hoveyda had changed, and the government of Amuzgar had come on board, and government of Amuzgar wanted to undo some of the complex situations that had been created at the time of Hoveyda, and one of those complex situations was really with faculty of Ariamehri University, because of the position that Hoveyda had on not increasing the salaries and the Comité Refah union, student union activities that were going on, and the clash of ideology between me and a number of other faculty members with those in the union, and not having any other course for resolution of the problems, all contributed to the fact that government of Amuzgar decided the best solution is to remove me. And I was glad, really glad of that decision. I mean, you don't know how glad I was.
Now I'm going to change the subject from Ariamehri University to National Iranian Copper Industry. What was your first impression as a new managing director of the National Iranian Copper Industry? Now I'm going to read you some of the categories regarding: 1, the validity of the concept of a copper industry for Iran.
Okay. Iran has a sizable reservoir of copper ore, and wherever there is a resource, a natural resource, the concept is valid. Now, the only question that can be asked in this regard, whether this valid concept of developing industry in Iran, should it really be done in form of a nationalized industry, or should it be given to private sector? The history of private sector in Iran essentially is reflective of this fact, that the private sector was primarily interested in making profit, and they would bring in a foreign firm to do all the exploitation and this sort of thing. And the real structure of cooperation between Iran and that foreign country would not be geared toward future development of an industrialized Iran. For this reason, it was decided that it would be done in a nationalized form. I didn't really have disagreement with the nationalization. There were aspects that I disagreed. Usually in Iran, whenever you could get away with a Chevette, you end up building a Cadillac. That's the problem. It could have been done slightly smaller in scale, but that wasn't the plan as initially drawn. Anyway, I think that I can answer you essentially that I agreed with the validity of the concept of a nationalized Iranian copper industry.
Okay. Now, what about the competence of the previous managing directors?
The managing directors, by and large, were competent people. The only problem that is really here to address is this: who are the Iranians? And I'm not talking about expatriates, but who are the Iranians who are assisting them? At the time that I joined National Iranian Copper Industries, the plant was half complete or less than half complete. In 1 year and a half that I was there, I pushed it as far as I could, so that by revolution, essentially by the outbreak of revolution, it was 97%, 98% complete. Well, now it is operating. I heard that it's operating at 1/4 of capacity because they have taken a lot of what we call a cannibalized one set in order to make the other set operational. The thing that was clear was lack of qualified Iranian technical people. I mean, that was something that hit me right in the face. The non-technical people, which is in the support, like accounting and this sort of thing, was phenomenal. Real good setup. Because both Mr. Niyazmand and Mr. Tawakkoli, who were previously managing directors of this company, they set up a nice administrative system, and they employed people who were qualified to do the work. However, technically, at the time of Niyazmand was relying primarily on Anaconda to provide the expatriates who would assist him. Anaconda never provided that the group of people that Niyazmand had in mind.
I'm sorry, what was that name? Honda?
Anaconda. That's Anaconda Copper.
Mm-hmm.
And Tawakkoli came from Tabriz machine manufacturing plant. He really didn't have anybody. I mean, he didn't come from background of responsible bureaucratic operations that he, like National Iranian Oil Company, that he could draw a lot of technical experts from. He essentially came from Tabriz. He brought 2-3 of the people who were working with him at that time. Most of them were not were very eager, but not capable of doing much.
How about the competence of the company's management and staff?
I think altogether it was relatively in the framework of Iran, with the exception of technical expertise. Again, it comprised of a group of highly motivated and qualified people. I brought in some people also. I try to build technical, manpower, and both in the operation, engineering, research, and this sort of areas. But those were the areas that were primarily lacking. Otherwise, I think that especially in the accounting of financial matters, in the contractual domain, etc., there were hierarchy of good people there.
Whether the foreign contracts and experts took sufficient notice of Iran's national interest?
Well, let's look at it from different groups who were involved. One group was contractor. The contractor was Ralph M. Parsons, and I think they are, second largest construction firm in the United States. They make their money by building plants outside of the United States, and they are in the business of making money and building. National interest of the country is none of their concern. It is the responsibility of the country that deals with them to save their shirts. The second group of technical people or expatriates who came from Anaconda. There was a sort of a management contract was signed with Anaconda after Anaconda was expelled from Chile following Allende's takeover, and the contract said something like this, that you help us send expatriates, Anaconda expatriates who are being released from Chile to Iran, and will pay their salary according to the U.S. Basis of the U.S. salary. We will pay 25% extra to them to come to Iran, and will provide housing for them at the mine, and something like that. Anyway, they had to pay Iranian taxes and American taxes simultaneously, so I think an additional stipulation was made in order to provide for them the necessary funds so that they would not be double taxed. But that part of Iranian tax was going back to government of Iran. That was another factor. So essentially, an American would get 25% extra pay for coming to Iran. The salaries were moderate. A very high caliber guy would get somewhere around $3,000, $3,500 a month salary. With this includes the 25%, which is really, it was, at that time, it was the type of salaries that you would see here in this country. And also, it was at the same time, it was hard to find an Iranian with the same salary converted with 7 tuman, 20,000 tuman salary to go to Sarcheshme between Sirjan and Rafsanjan. It wasn't that easy. Iranians that we ended up hiring were almost being paid the same sort of salary, but of the same caliber. So it wasn't that the Americans were getting a special treatment. This is just on the side. These people were supposedly the high technical people that would come, and they would be seconded or seconding an Iranian. That means I was supposed to have a head of engineering, and I would bring somebody from Anaconda, and I would put there as head of engineering to work in parallel with this guy, so that after a couple of years that this guy leaves, you would have a head of engineering with some experience of this American. Well, this is what was in the contract. What the previous managements of the copper industry had not done was to find that Iranian and put in there who would be qualified enough to become a head of engineering. You see what I'm saying? Yes. Therefore, if the American did or did not do his job properly, it would be of no consequence because the Iranian wasn't there to absorb it. And that was the part I am saying. I tried to restructure it. I tried to minimize the number of expatriates and try to get the key Iranian positions filled up. The only part that was really operating properly was the mine, which had an Iranian in charge of it. And there were some expatriates, but the expatriates were working under the Iranian. I reorganized everything because the organizations that they had drawn was awful.
You mean
the foreigners, I mean the expatriates.
But expatriates, American expatriates.
American expatriates primarily. Then the because it was getting expensive getting people from Anaconda. I think previous administration, which was at the time of Mr. Tawakkoli, they decided to go to South Africa and hire in the free market people and bring to Iran. To South Africans, the same guy with $3,000, $4,000 salary would be hired from South Africa with $1,000 to $2,000 salary. In fact, we had a number of expatriates from South Africa who were hired with $700 salary. It wasn't such a high, which we wouldn't find even a jushgar Irani to be able to, a welder to be able to place at the same position. But anyway, after the revolution, all those people left. By and large, I would say, to respond to your question, I would say that whatever, it wasn't the doing of the expatriates if we did not get enough from them, it was because of our inaction.
When you say our inaction, do you mean that it was not organizationally planned well by the...
It was organizationally planned well, but it was never implemented well. I mean, you had in the plan the fact that you would second this person, this expatriate would second an Iranian. Iranian wasn't there and he was operating, or they gave the guy who was supposed to be the head of engineering, an Iranian who was so feeble and who was really not qualified, so that this guy really became Pado of the Americans. And what I did, I tried to change that, sort of structure the personnel so that and then I demanded that they were supposed to conduct, Anaconda was supposed to conduct training programs to train the operators and this sort of thing. And I sent 100 people to Anaconda. I sent I sent about 100 people, 100 operators. I selected from Kerman area who had some technical background and diploma, etc. And I sent them to America. I sent them to South Africa for training. South Africa was extremely cooperative at that time. I think Iran was one of the only countries that smiled to them, so they were willing to do anything. And whenever we asked, we had a request from South African government, they were more than happy to accommodate.
So do you mean that the structure was there, except that the Iranians didn't know how to use it? And
no, they were so busy. Probably the previous managing directors were so busy that this was not on top of their priority. Or you can also consider this fact that it was very hard at that time to find, especially this is 1974, 75, to find qualified technical people in Iran who would really assume responsibilities that the physical plant wasn't there. Remember, Iran didn't have many engineers. All the engineers that we had were young graduates, so you wouldn't be able to find anybody with some experience in engineering of a large physical plant or a factory or a complex factory with metallurgy, mining, material handling, all of these things in enormous scale in it. What happened as a result? Well, it was hard to find fill such positions.
On the whole, were these foreign contracts necessary and beneficial for Iran? The foreign contracts that you are referring to, the construction contracts, they are the only people who can do the job. I mean, when you look at construction of a plant, Iran didn't have at that time even enough contractors to do civil work, and for much of civil work in Iran they had to bring in contractors from abroad. However, I would say that with hindsight I could have done it differently, in the sense that I could have done a lot of I could have participated more actively in the administration of the construction if I were there from the beginning. The construction management was primarily left at the beginning to the American firm, with Iran picking up the tab. At my time, we were actively involved with them. In fact, we were getting they had to provide us with pro forma invoices, and we would check that and this sort of thing. It was a lot of interaction going on. It may have slowed down the construction a little bit, otherwise we may have been able to go faster, but I don't believe in that. I mean, whenever something we had to do, we did it very quickly. By and large, Iranians are very good in construction. If we have to do it now, the situation is different. I mean, at that time we didn't have many engineers. Now we have about triple the size of 3 times larger number of engineers in Iran even. When you say at that time, how long did...
That's 74. The population of engineers in Iran underwent a significant change. In 1968, there were only, or 66 actually, there were only 11,000 engineers in the entire country. Now this is all areas. If the revolution had not taken place and all the engineers that we had generated would remain in the country with the same pace, we would have close to 70 to 100,000 engineers now. But even in 1974, it had increased to around 20,000 or something like that. The engineers were not that many. The influx of engineers really started around 74. They came back to Iran, and the engineering schools started producing in larger numbers. Otherwise, before that, in 50s and 60s, there were only 1 or 2 or 3 schools that they used to take a limited number of students every year and graduate 3/4 of them and lose the rest by attrition.
Were these contracts signed on purely technical and business basis, or were there political or other considerations involved?
The one contract I was involved with was the contract with Krupp and Machine for the refinery, copper refinery. The contract was put on bid after Anaconda prepared the documents through a consulting engineering firm, I think, the bidding documents. It went on bid. It specified what sort of plant and this sort of things we wanted. I remember some international companies participated in the bid. There were essentially two competing bids. One of them belonged to a sort of a consortium of American and Japanese, and the other one was another consortium of Belgian and Krupp. It was recommended by Mr. Tawakkoli to the Economic Council, High Economic Council, that we signed the contract with Krupp and Machine Consortium, and His Majesty agreed. The difference in price was relatively few $1 million only. The basis of that agreement was this, that what were the things that Krupp and Machine were giving us was slightly better than what American, and it was slightly more expensive, about $2-3 million, but Shaw argued that we own 25% of Krupp, and as a result some of the interest gets back to us, so it was given to Krupp. Based only on technical consideration, the two were sort of toss-up. I mean, it wasn't one of them much better than the other. When I became the managing director of the company, I knew that I had to sign the contract with Krupp and Machine. I gathered a group of technical people, and I hired somebody. This person was also hired from before. A fantastic lawyer. He was an American lawyer who was both an electrical engineer and a lawyer, and was a contract lawyer. Very smart, and we negotiated 1 month, day and night, every sentence, every phrase, etc. After revolution, it was declared that that's one of the best contracts, that was signed. But it was purely technical. At no time I was pressed, with the exception of 2-3 things. One, I received a letter from Japanese that said that we are willing to reduce our price few $1 million. And that letter I sent, this was after it was selected, I sent to Mr. Ansari. Mr. Ansari said, if you, once you have selected and declared, if you want to get trapped in this sort of argument, we can. So we answered it no. This is, but usually we did it rightfully. That means it was we tried to gain as much as possible in the final drafting and negotiations of the terms of the contract. And it was a beautiful contract. In spite of the revolution and all the problems, it was built, and it was built successfully, and it's working. That's the important thing. Yeah.
When was it signed? When was the contract signed?
The contract was signed late 1977. I negotiated. Probably early 1978 was signed.
And then the construction began?
The construction began immediately, and it went on during my time, and then even after revolution it continued. There were some disruptions. Within a year or year and a half of disruptions, it was finished. But at no time there were any pressure on me for anything by anybody. However, one day the head of the director of machine came to my office and asked me that somebody had approached him and wanted kickback of some form for the role in negotiation. I called the Minister of Industries who was also resigning at that time, and I told him that such a thing had happened. Anyway, he said that ask him to pursue it and this sort of thing to the extent that we could document it and give it to the Attorney General's office for prosecution. Apparently that was nothing happened.
What role did the Shah play in decisions relating to the copper company? He was under the impression that the copper was much larger than what it was and was worth much more than what it really was. Somehow somebody must have given him this idea. Iran had so much copper, and after a lot of work we were able to prove that the Iranian reserve of ore is so much. And Shah, I learned that Mr. Tawakkoli had informed the Shah a year before of a number which was higher than the one that we had just established. So I think that there was some eagerness on the part of the managing directors to convey the message that this is bigger than what actually it is. But Shah was, with the exception of the decision that I know he had made initially on setting up the firm and this sort of thing, I only had one audience with him during that time. I only had one audience with him during that time that I told him about the progress of copper industries, and also I told him of the molybdenum. And Shah said, "What is molybdenum?" I said, "Well, this ore has a high content of molybdenum. In fact, it would be considered by some as a molybdenum mine too." He said, "What is molybdenum?" And I explained to him that molybdenum is used in special alloys to make extra strong steel, which is used primarily for gas pipeline and this sort of things, like the pipe that were, for example, used in Russia. They have high molybdenum content. And he said immediately, "Why don't you talk to Ardebili of steel industries and set up a special alloy plant in Iran." We set up in Iran, which is also operational, I heard, a molybdenum plant that creates molybdenum concentrate. We established the foundation for building a molybdenum roasting plant, essentially. And anyway, he was very much interested in technical discussions that we had at that time, but something very funny happened when I was over there with Shah, in the only audience that I had with him, private audience, during the time I was the head of copper industries. Apparently, he suddenly stopped talking to me, picked up the phone and called Prime Minister Amuzegar and told him, write in the papers that the government would apologize for the action that has taken place, but don't mention the name of the Ayatollah. This was the same day that the Havani Rus had entered Shariat Madari's home and 3 people were killed. So the government of Amuzegar officially apologized in that incident, and I know that this was something else was on his mind apparently, because he suddenly stopped talking to me and picked up the phone and called Amuzegar and told him, tell him to say in the papers and the television that the government apologizes, but don't mention the name of Ayatollah. And that was it? No.
Yeah, that was it. He hung up. But apparently, Prime Minister had talked to him on the incident before, and he was thinking about what to do, and probably that's what he did. he was very much interested in that time to know when are we going to finish, how we are going to do it, what are the downstream activities, and what are we doing? Does it make sense altogether or not?
Yes. I'm just a little bit confused over these constructions. When did exactly the constructions begin, and how long did it take? I mean, it seems to be
the construction has different elements in it. First, there is a construction of mine and concentrator and smelter. Concentrator, essentially, the ore is 1% copper. The concentrator is about 30% copper. The ore is 90-some-odd% copper, and it's an ore. Then it's the refinery that refines it in an electrolytic refinery, and you get 99.9% copper plates. Then there is casting, that you have to roll it, make or billet slabs and this sort of things. Then it's rolling, that you make different sheets, tubes, and this sort of thing. At the time when I say the first, Ralph M. Parson was in charge of the construction of the concentrator and smelter. Krupp Machine was in charge of the construction of the casting plant and refinery. And then the downstream stuff that makes tubes, cables, etc., etc. Also a continuous casting, which is a plant that would give you rods. The rods would be used for cables and this sort of thing.
So we were going through a station.
Yeah, this is industries, the plural aspect. Yeah.
That's why I was a bit confused. Well, actually, this question is very much related to the one I just asked you before. Did you have regular audiences with the Shah as managing director?
One only, and I described it to you.
When did you first sense that the monarchy was about to be overthrown? Or did you have a sense?
I think that I really didn't. I was so involved with my work that I didn't really think that the monarchy was about to be overthrown until the days of revolution.
So you had no inkling about what was about to happen?
Well, not in that sense. I was under the impression that probably there is going to be some major changes in Iran, but the major changes I was envisaging probably was more in democratization of the society and this sort of things, rather than a change of monarchy altogether. I think that by the time Shah, the Bakhtiyar was in power, one was sensing that something was going to go wrong. And Khomeini had returned to Iran and this sort of thing. I think the real... I had seen a lot of demonstrations when I was a kid, because our house was close to Serai Jale, and I right in that area during the time of Mossadegh. I wasn't under the impression that monarchy was going to collapse so easily.
Did you have a sense that the Shah was firmly in control?
No. I think that I wasn't under the impression that Shah was firmly in control, but I had more trust in the entire structure of the Iranian regime. I never thought that even if Shah wasn't entirely in control, it would make that much of a difference. No, I was the audience I had. The last time I saw Shah was long ago. About a year before revolution or something close to that, 8 months, whenever that. It's a famous day. It must be in the spring of 1978, I think. 77. It's spring of 1977.
Late.
Yeah. And At that time he was in power, because if you remember, few weeks after this incident, آموزگار regime put up a massive demonstration in Tabriz. Millions of people came and shouted pro-Shah slogans. That was a fantastic action on the part of آموزگار and Tawakkoli, who was instrumental in that. So even by late 1977, it was obvious that Shah was in control. But I had a notion that I conveyed to several people. I said, hey, the same thing that happened in universities is happening on the streets of Tehran. And we have understood that phenomena, and we could cope with it in some way. At least the way that we coped with it at the university was well established. And you are doing everything wrong. I mean, you are not drawing from the experience that you had. And if you want to cope with the problems of streets, you have to adopt the philosophy of not antagonizing the bystanders. The bystander is going to let them break windows, and then let's establish some avenues for prosecution, not even a physical prosecution, at least in the minds of the people. You have to establish who is at fault, who is the oppressor, or who is the activist, and who is Zalem, who is Mazlum. I mean, that you have to establish. But anyway, that didn't get anywhere. It was easy to say, hard to come up with nuts and bolts and things like that.
To whom did you say
I talked with our minister. I asked him to convey that to Mr. Amuzigar, which was Mr. Amin.
What, if anything, did you and your friends try to do to prevent the collapse of the regime?
First, you have to recognize that we didn't know the regime was collapsed. If you look at it from 2 points of view, from the point of view of that whatever was happening, revolution, as Shah called it, was going to create an environment of democratization in Iran, we weren't opposed to that, and we liked it. And if the revolution was supposed to be a mechanism for realization of this level of democratization, fine, there was nothing wrong with it. If the revolution was collapse of the regime, well, he didn't really recognize that the regime was collapsing until very late. And well, not much could have been done at that time. We were trying to only make the transition from transition smoothly. I mean, that's I think what concerned most people. And the transition was really, I was primarily concerned about the lives and safety of so many expatriates that we had, and not only regular expatriates from, say, South Africa or America. One of them, an American, was killed in Kerman during the revolution, who was an agent of the construction firm for local purchases in Kerman. He was murdered by the revolutionaries. His throat was cut by glass, rubbing against the glass. he was one of the 2 Americans who died in revolution in Iran. I was concerned about their safety. I had lots of Koreans. The Koreans were strong workers. They were electrical workers that were not that many of them around in Iran, who were working on the control equipment, and I had to get them out. And you had to settle their account and do this and etc. and get them out, and this was not easy. The problem is to pass. I mean, I had somewhere around 10,000 people under my direct or indirect supervision, and I wanted to get the company to do a smooth landing. I mean, I didn't want the system to collapse. Even after revolution of Bazargan wanted me to stay. Well, I know why, because he couldn't do anything immediately, but I resigned anyway. It was very hard. Nobody really, it wasn't considered a revolution even after Bazargan had come, because I didn't see any of the immediately, except for the institution of royal palace and monarchy. No other institution of Iran was subject to immediate change after Bazargan took over. But as time went on, the situation changed.
Then again, this is a follow-up question. Please describe your life and thoughts on the eve of the revolution and the days that followed.
I know when Shah went from Iran, and I saw the tremendous happiness that was demonstrated in Iran, and some of them not so pleasantly by somebody. I think he had exposed his bottom or something like that as a demonstration of his exuberance. Anyway, I was sad. I was really sad. In fact, when I came back to my office, I was going to visit the minister. When I came back to my office, somebody had removed the picture of Shah from the wall, and the traces, and it was done by, they didn't want, now that Shah is gone, anybody come and break anything, so they just, as a preventive measure, moved all the pictures of Shah away from. And when I looked at that, I was, I remember tears came to my eyes. I mean, why, I don't know. But then, when the revolution took place, I remember I went to, first of all, I'm talking about Sunday. I stayed home. I remember that day I stayed home. Although Saturday I went to office. On Sunday I stayed home. And I was getting all those news of collapsing one after another these institutions, military complexes and this sort of thing. And my wife was a medical doctor, and I remember in the middle of this setup we had to go to hospital, so I went with her. I was concerned that of looting and this sort of thing. I was I'm just thinking whether I was concerned about my own life. I mean, I wasn't concerned about my own life, but I remember I was really trying to think what I would be doing from now on. I mean, I had a sort of a course that was of activities that was in the university and later on in the cover, and I knew that with this I'm not going to be in government anymore. I didn't want to be in government anymore. That was, in fact, I remember I went day after I went to my father and I started discussing with him that I now want to resign from everywhere. I knew that the best way is to go on a line of business which is other than government job. Well, none of these two organizations were solely government, but they were, for all practical purposes, they were government. I wanted to go into engineering and this sort of things, maybe establish a consulting firm or work with somebody who has a consulting firm. But anyway, I was more concerned at that time with I wasn't too concerned about what is going to happen to me. I was looking at the stuff and I was just concerned about myself, I suppose, and in the sense of a very futuristic type of thing, not immediate concern. The revolution took place with a lot of order, and I knew that I wasn't feeling concerned about myself at all. In fact, I was shocked when I went back to university and one of the students said that we want to take you to jail. I went to the jail and I talked to the person and I wanted to leave because they took me to so that they examine the papers and see whether they need me or not, or they want me to stay or not. But I told the guy that I have a 4 o'clock appointment and I have to leave. I mean, I never considered that I would be of the kind that would be kept there for 4.5 months. But they had, well, I didn't have all the information.
The next question has to do with the period that you were in jail. If you would like, this is, please describe the circumstances under which you were arrested and imprisoned.
I went to university. One of the students came to me. Probably he was intrigued by one of the faculty members from that union I was talking about, and very politely asked me to follow him. I went to the guard building, the university guard building. He had a machine gun with him, but it was under his. Many students were carrying machine gun at that time because all these machine guns were released, and many of these students participated in the orgy. Anyway, I went to the guard building. They were extremely polite.
Give me a call sometime.
Okay, I will. And then after a few minutes, the guy came in and told me that we have requested the Revolutionary Attorney General whether they need you for imprisonment, and they have said no. So we have sent all the classified files of the university in which your signature appears to them for decision. I said okay, and anyway, apparently the answer never came. After a while, he came and said that we have to take you there because the answer never came. So they took me there, and I went to Zindan Qasr, and there was I went to they took me very politely, but the cars that these committee members had who belonged to chief of police or something, because it was a Mercedes and this sort of thing. And anyway, they took me there, and then a man came with beers and he started questioning me. The questions were, he was going through the file and he was asking, what is this document and what is your relationship? He asked me 2-3 questions. What was your relationship to Shah? What was your relationship to Savak? And I told him that Shah was this guy and I had met him several times. And what was your relationship to Savak? I told him I have no special relationship except what is in the course of one's duties. And then they asked me about specific documents. They didn't know much about the organization set up in Iran because they were asking a lot of dumb questions. Anyway, and then finally I told him that, hey, I have devoted all my life in education and I believe in education. I have built a university, and I believe that the only way to the prosperity of the future of Iran is in educating the youth of the country. And said that, you are a reformist and we are a revolutionary, and our two paths are different. Agreed. Anyway, I later told him that I have to go because I have an appointment at 4 o'clock, and you asked me these questions and I answered you. The intention was never, and you cannot keep me here because you have declared on the newspapers and radios that nobody, if there is no complaint, you cannot arrest anybody. He said that, he turned around and asked the guy, is there any complaint? He said, no. I said, well, I have been at the university. If there is any complaint, you can ask the students, because there were a number of students who were working, especially the Mujahideen group, were working in the prison. Apparently, prison was held in the hands of Mujahideen, at least the administration part, or people who were pro-Mujahideen, maybe because of more religious inclinations that they had. But there were a lot of students. So he went and gathered all the students of Ariamehr University who were working inside Qasr, and there were 10, 12 of them came inside the room. Said, does anybody have a complaint against this gentleman? Very polite. And the guy, nobody uttered a word. One of them came forward, said that when I was when you were in university one day, you called me and you said that go see Savak, and because they want you, and when you get out, call me immediately. That was true, because I didn't want Savak to interfere as much as possible. So I told him that whatever you want to do to my students, which is official, based on your authority, you have to do it through me. I mean, so they called one day. They said, we need to talk to this boy. I said, if you're going to arrest him, I'm not going to stay behind this desk. I'm going to go home. He said, no, we are not going to arrest him. Just want to talk to him. So I called the guy. Said, go over there, talk to them. When you come back, I said, what else did I tell you? He said, you said that if you don't come out by 11 o'clock, you don't call me by 11 o'clock, I will go home and I will not return to this. So that sort of even strengthened my position in front of the guy. The guy said, okay, we are going to ask Haj Agha whether we can release you or not. Apparently the file with a recommendation or something was sent to a Haj Agha who was an Ahang Furush or something in charge of prison. Haj Agha looked at the file, says that, what is this Niyabat Tawliyat Uzma? The guy came back and said, what is Niyabat Tawliyat Uzma? And I said, well, Niyabat Tawliyat Uzma means, well, the English translation of that is Vice Chancellor or something like that. And that is what they called the chancellor of the university. He said, حاج آقا میگن who is تولیت عظما? I said, Shah. He said, تولیت عظما is Shah. حاج آقا decided that since I was vice to Shah, I should stay. And they said, why don't you declare in the university if there is any complaint, because I had raised a technical issue and we are going to keep you. I was under the impression after 1 or 2 days I will be released. Apparently there was no complaint or of any consequence, and finally they released me after 4.5 months.
I'm going to turn the same.
Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, would you like to continue?
No, that's it. That's how I got arrested.
Life in prison?
Well, life in prison, we started, at the beginning was very hard. There were about 40 students of Tehran University who were pro-Shah, and they were all arrested for gathering and under the title of Mashrute constitutionalists. Anyway, they were in prison, and as soon as I came in, they received me, and they had created a very lively atmosphere inside the prison. The prison was horrible. I mean, with the hole essentially, and anyway, but a lot of restrictions. At the beginning, there was a lot of danger to one's life because they were randomly taking people and killing also. Executions were conducted at night and this sort of thing. Probably you have heard that because you must have interviewed others from prison. Anyway, we soon started. There were no reading materials, nothing. After a month or so, the situation relaxed a little bit. And then executions picked up again until executions somewhere toward the late of summer, sort of middle of summer, stopped altogether, except for sporadic executions. But massive killings were going on. People were getting released at that time or executed, but it was quick. By the time I was in prison, which was I was arrested on 20th of its month. Then executions went on for a few days. It sort of stopped. It picked up again, but it stopped in midsummer altogether with some sporadic here and there. At the beginning, we were very restricted, about 400 people in sort of cold prison environment, awfully bad weather, and essentially the food was lousy. We were given 16 of us. I remember we slept in a room which was about 16 by 12 feet, square feet, right? 16 by 12, which is 4 meters by 5 meters, something like that. And the prisoners, who comprise a bunch of military people, a bunch of Savakis, and sort of a third group of civilians. The Savakis were relatively safe, although what was on the outside was really that the Savakis were getting into prison and executed. The Savakis were safe. Nothing was happening to them. The civilians, some of them that had cooperated at certain places with the previous regime in the sense of demolishing the revolution or preventing the revolution. They were executed very rapidly, but the rest of them were safe. By and large, the civilians were safe. The military people were not safe at all. They were killing military, and this is really, this sort of convinces me more that Mujahideen were in power, and they wanted to dismantle the military as it was. I was amazed by pictures of Fadaiyan Islam on the wall, pictures of PLO chief Yasser Arafat on the wall, kissing Khomeini. A lot of pictures of Khomeini, of course. I wasn't amazed by that. But anyway, that was... later on, we set up a reading, and we started reading lots of books because we could get books from outside. So we exchanged. No, they permitted us. The only book, the first book that I read there, which was the only one that was available, was a Quran, a torn Quran, remnants of the Shah's regime. Anyway, after 4.5 months, we had a fire. The next day, as we were cleaning the suit, they called my name and said, we are releasing you, you are free to go. No questioning in the interim.
So the first day they arrested you, and they just kept you there, they didn't let you call your family? Or
No, I requested, and they said please, and I called my family. Apparently, the guys, because I was chancellor of the university, or some of them were my students, my own students, they were very polite. I remember one of them came with me to the prison and told the guy, this is a special guy, all the extend all possible privileges. So when I went to prison, I had my tie and this sort of thing. And I understand some of the Savakis were badly beaten at the time of arrest and afterwards. So, but I was treated with a lot of respect.
So, were you actually charged with any particular crime?
No.
Nothing. You started talking about the reading groups in prison.
No.
Could you describe them?
Well, we started getting various... there were a bunch of us that were there, including a number of cabinet members of Bakhtiyar, including Hossein Ali Bakhtiyar, Ariana, and also a number of Amuzegar and Hoveida were cabinet members, and others that we used to read a lot. I mean, just continuously read there.
You were all in the same group together?
Well, we were in the same band. Some of us were in the same room, some of the others were in other rooms or separate part of band, but we could exchange books and this sort of thing.
Did you read together, or did you read?
Well, we were exchanging books and reading it quickly and discussing it afterwards and creating hypothetical situations and then trying to resolve and discuss what are the issues and this sort of things. And some of the very interesting discussions were conducted probably in prison. This was primarily to keep the mind working.
What were some of those issues you discussed?
Oh, anything from housing, from really the... I mean, it was related to topics like poverty, social, political, technical topics. We selected, we read about it, we discussed it, even very Islamic topics like the foundation of the philosophy of Islam, as explained by Abu Ali Sina and these sort of things, and the errors, that logical errors that they had made, and this sort of thing.
Did you try to get any of your jail owners involved?
No, they were dumb. They were dumb. They were kids, dumb.
Okay, please tell me which of the following historical figures that you have personally known you'd be willing to describe. I'm going to read you the list. Dr. Manouchehr Iqbal.
Dr. Manouchehr Iqbal, I know him. He was quite a patriot. He loved Shah. He loved the regime, and he would do whatever he could for its preservation. He was considered as senile by Hoveyda and others in the last years of his life. But whenever I had a problem or something, he was there and he was helping. He would help young people who were, in his mind, motivated to build the country or do something.
Sharif Imami, Jafar Sharif Imami.
I knew Sharif Imami. He was also a member of Board of Trustees, and I knew him. He was a religious man. He used to he never drank wine or liquor, this sort of thing. He used to pray regularly. He was essentially conducting all the Jalasa Hiyat Amna. He knew of the he was a good lawmaker in the sense that when you wanted to write something, he knew what to do and how to do it. He was very highly respected by everybody. That's the extent of my familiarity. Shah liked him very much.
In terms of capabilities and qualities as administrators and prime ministers, do you have any observations about?
Well, at the time he was prime minister, I know the consequences of what happened. He was he tried to solve a problem, and he didn't have he didn't have the means of solving them. I would not label him as Khain or something like that, if that's the question.
No.
No, he tried to do something, and he tried to do it at that time. I am under the impression that he was somewhat corrupt, but that's impression. This is just hearsay. I don't have first-hand knowledge.
Mehdi Bazargan.
I didn't know him personally.
Asadullah Alam.
He was kind. His father knew my grandfather, and he had a high respect for me because of the family that he knew well. And I think that if he could help something, he would. He was a very capable administrator in that regard. I mean, at the same time, I know that much of the problems were created because of his specific views. But this is not my intimate information. It again is hearsay. I mean, I don't have personal experience of something. I met him several times, and I talked to him once or twice. I was never very close to him. I met him several times. Once I went to see him about a concept that I had about creating a center for, or we had, creating a center for theoretical physics on an international and I talked to him at length. I talked to him about the concepts of the concept of the Áriamhear University also. He later on selected me on a sort of a bunch of freelance advisors for direction of research in Iran, Shahbanu, and I was working with Majidi and several others, Najmabadi Majidi and some others, in order to come up with a sort of a what is the concept of, and my position was unique because I was in favor of pure theoretical research, as opposed to many people like Najmabadi who said we have to do nuts and bolts type of research. I was more in favor of creating a culture, scientific culture in Iran, rather than solving the leaky oil somewhere.
How did you receive the problems you discussed with him?
Whenever I met Shahbanu in these regards, I was sitting down. I mean, it was very informal in that regard. I don't recall ever meeting Shahbanu in which I was standing up like the audience with Shah. I was sitting down, and many times I was nervous and sweating, but most of the time I was relaxed, and he would ask me if I wanted to smoke, and he would give me a cigarette. She would give me a cigarette, and anyway, it was very informal in that regard. She was arguing back and forth, and I was arguing along with her. I mean, that's it was a very normal type of meeting rather than an audience. Most of the 2-3 times I went there was primarily based on research. She wanted my opinion or my contribution in a discussion that involved research. Yes, once we went with some of the chancellors of university because we were addressing questions like Heyat Omana and things of that nature. Once or twice.
Why was she interested in research?
She was somehow toward the end, from 76, 77, she became very much interested in research, and she became somehow the head of the Royal Academy of Science or Research Institution, something to that extent. I don't know exactly the title. And she was interested to sort of formulate a general research policy. And I was one of the proponents of the science as the main thing, rather than as opposed to people who were more on the applied part. I had a very unique position in that regard, that unless a good scientific basis is established, it's very hard to make people to go to ad hoc experts in the country instead of the country of origin where they bought the instrument from. I met Amir Abbas Hoveyda several times, and I discussed with him. It was usually whenever something rose that he wanted to see me in that regard, or we had problem with this union and this sort of thing. By and large, he was very smart. He was, I think he was a good prime minister. He understood the issues very fast. Many of these other people you mentioned, they never understood the issues. He had an analytical mind in the sense that he could take a problem apart and find a solution. He was well read. I remember that he quoted from a book in one of my meetings called The Art of War, and he suddenly made a quotation from that, and I recognized this is a very strange book, and not many people have read it. It's written several thousand years ago in China, and it's translated. And I came up with another quotation from the book I don't remember, and he was impressed too that I had read it also.
When you say he was aware of the issues, you mean the social issues?
Well, many of the people in Shah's regime, they thought that opposition doesn't exist. Maybe they were kept away, I mean, unless you were in universities. But he knew you didn't have to. You had hard time probably to tell Shah that there are people who don't believe in you. But I don't think you had that much problem with the Prime Minister to convince that there are a large number of people who don't believe in اعلی حضرت همایونی شاهنشاه آریامهر ارواح نافدا etc. etc.
Jamshid Amuzagar.
Jamshid Amuzagar, I know him again. He was in Board of Trustees, and I had come in contact with him. He was a technocrat. He didn't have the socio-political grasp of the situation that Hoveyda had. But he was very naive in certain respect. He was naive, and he didn't enjoy the cooperation of Savak, I know, because Savak was essentially in the hand of Hoveyda. I mean, all those people were Hoveyda people. And somehow, when Amuzagar came, he didn't know. In fact, he had complained several times that he didn't hear of what happened in the Rex cinema until he read it in the newspaper. He said, what kind of prime minister is this that has to read one of the biggest issues of the country at the time of turmoil in the newspaper? But anyway, I would say that he was a correct man. I mean, he had certain infatuations with decentralization and this sort of thing. He was he could distinguish between technical baloney and technically sound ideas. But this was an advantage he had over Hoveyda, but socially and politically he wasn't of the same caliber, and he didn't have that grasp. My experience is also limited. Ali Khani was an extremely bright man, and he was I know him, I have been with him on several occasions. He's very bright man, and he contributed. He was one of the very few people who came to Ariamehr University, gathered all the students, and he asked him now. He delivered a lecture on the economy of Iran, and he said, ask me questions. And the students started asking embarrassing questions. He started to answer them. And he went through with that, and finally all the students stood up and clapped for him for 10 minutes. And then, on the other hand, he was also in Savak and this sort of things, and initially, but apparently that his initial association with Savak, of course, that was Savak of Mr. What's the guy before Nasiri? Anyway. With that, Savak is something else, but anyway, he was well respected amongst most people, and in 2-3 times that I met him and I dealt with him, he showed brilliance. I met him in Ramsar several times and spent some hours because I was going as the head of planning, development and research of the Ariamehr University at the time, and he was chancellor of Tehran University, and he was close friend of Amin, so he used to play bridge.
Hushang Ansari.
Hushang Ansari, I dealt with him several times. Again, he seemed to be a bright person. I remember Iran wanted to buy a copper mine in Mexico. He sent it. He asked me to analyze it, to give him a recommendation. I made an analysis and came up with recommendation Iran shouldn't buy it. But what he wanted and the way he went about it was very proper. When I was chancellor of university, he wanted me to join his faction of the Rastafi party, and he said that you lay yourself on the university in my hand and I'll do anything for you. I didn't. I said, well, that's faction. Politics is. Rastafi's party is supposed to be individual's choice. How can I do that? But anyway,
factions in Rastafi's party.
There were two factions. One of them under Ansari, the other one was under Amuzegar, if you recall, at the beginning.
Dr. Shahpur Bakhtiyar.
I don't know.
Shah Mohammad Reza.
I think he was a well-wishing person. I saw a lot of patriotism in him. I saw a lot of I didn't see a villain. I saw always a democratic person. I don't think that if the situation was somewhat different, and he would end up like this. I think that a lot of judgment that we pass on him is a matter of several incidents that took place, including the revolution, important incidents. I think by and large he wasn't a powerful dictator. He wasn't an oppressor. When you talk to him, you would feel it. I was in prison and I saw people who were in Savak who had this attitude, especially people in Savak, that that they had a sort of natural right to anything. He wasn't that kind. At least during the several times that I met him, he didn't demonstrate himself to be that kind. But nevertheless, the country was run as such that he was that kind of person. I don't know what happened. I don't know what was really, or what were the historical events that led to a country being run, although the person is not really that kind of person. I suppose whatever happened in Iran is a consequence of a number of historical events, including the assassination attempt to him at University of Tehran, the incident at the time of Mossadegh, him getting kicked out and coming back And then later on, the role of mullahs, the role of fadaiyan, or whatever is the history of Iran, created a role that if any other person was in his shoes, probably end up in the same position. A lot of people are really are made by history, and some people make history. Well, he was made by history, as opposed to Khomeini, who made history. I mean, that's what I think of it.
I'm going to change. Okay. Ashraf, Princess Ashraf.
I met her once, and she was the kind that Shah wasn't. I mean, she was really an oppressor by, I mean, she really demonstrated that she's somebody, and she wants to operate an operator at heart. The two characters, but I judge her because of my previous visualization of what she would be like. So when I saw her, it just reinforced my previous position. Let's put it this way: I didn't see anything from her to get an idea other than the public opinion.
I would like to comment on each of the Ariamehr University chancellors, starting from the first one.
Well, the first one was Mushtahidi. Mushtahidi was a builder who came to the university and started to setting it up. One of the hardest things is setting up, but it's the most enjoyable. And he did that. He had no conception of the philosophy of education and research and what was going to be done inside those rooms and halls and laboratories that he set up. Then after that, Professor Reza came, who was really a guy who had the knowledge or intimate knowledge of what should be done there. And he laid the foundation for doing that. He changed the educational structure to be able to accommodate that. Then Reza Amin came. Reza Amin was a guy who is a tremendous administrator. He deals with people properly, and he succeeded to create a lot of the infrastructure for administration of the university, the laws, regulations, this, that. He injected that element that was at university, which was democratization of the process of decision making, which was there. And a byproduct of that was union formation that started at his time. Dr. Nasr was the next chancellor of the university. He has extremely good ideas. He can analyze the situation, come up with the roots of the problem with his taint of Islam and culture and things of that nature. He's not a very good implementer of ideas. I think that if he would bunch up with somebody and would get intimate with him, then the combination of the two can be really powerful. Because implementing is requires different attention, different level of attention and dedication. The last one is me. I don't comment on myself. The one after me was Ali Reza Mehran. Alireza Mehran was a very trustworthy, straight man, a good researcher in his time. Anyway, he was really a right man for a smaller institution at a time of less turmoil. It just happened that in his time there was lots of turmoil, and the setup of the university and the problems was too much for him. He would have made an excellent head of the department or this sort of. Many of these people, I'm not talking about him, I'm talking about myself and other people, we were out-promoted. The reason is this, that Iran lacked the high administration, and a lot of people were over-promoted beyond their range of normal capability. But that's the characteristics of a developing country, rapidly developing country.
Thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome.